Hello, everyone. My name is Gene Cash, and I'm a professor in the College of Psychology at Nova Southeastern University. My colleague is Dr. Shannon Worton, and she'll be doing a significant portion of this presentation. The title of the presentation is Parents as Teachers, How to Keep Your Sanity. And that's a very important issue, keeping your sanity. By the way, some of you may not realize that since the COVID virus became a pandemic, and actually because of the COVID virus, I have become very famous. Not famous for being a psychologist, but it turns out that everywhere I go, people are waving and saying, "Hi, Gene." So that is the extent of my fame. At any rate, keeping your sanity is a very important issue during any stressful situation, particularly something as traumatic as a pandemic. And one of the things that we're going to be talking, or some of the things that we're going to be talking about today, involve how parents can be effective teachers for their kids. I'd like to put in a plug for our school psychology program here at Nova Southeastern. School psychologists are the best trained mental health professionals in the schools, and they are resources, wonderful resources for teachers, for students, for other school personnel, for administrators, in helping to facilitate and to maximize student achievement, not only academic achievement, but also social achievement and social emotional learning and so forth. So it's really important to keep in mind that our school psychology program trains those folks at a specialist level and or a doctoral level to be effective support systems, support personnel for people in schools. People sometimes ask me, what is a school psychologist anyway? And I'm fond of saying that a school psychologist is a professional who knows more about psychology than any educator and who knows more about education than any other psychologist. There is currently a critical shortage of school psychologists around the country. And so the graduates of our programs, the specialist program and the doctoral program in school psychology, have no difficulty getting good jobs with good benefits. And many of them also do private practice, either full-time or as an adjunct to their responsibilities in the schools. So we hope you, if you are interested in school psychology, that you will contact someone at the university and ask about our school psychology programs. Now, the most important thing in knowing how to keep your sanity, in my view, is to follow the airline principle. Some of you may be asking, what the heck is an airline principle? Well, I'll tell you. I fly a lot, usually on planes. The spiel that they give you at the beginning of every flight, because they all do it, is that safety presentation that the flight attendants have to do, I generally find not very helpful. For example, they tell you, if we have a crash landing over water, you can reach under your seat and find your life vest, and then they tell you how to put it on, how to attach it and adjust it and so forth. And my thought is, if we have a crash landing underwater, I may very well reach under my seat and kiss my rear end goodbye. But there is something that they tell you during the safety spiel that is very important. They tell you that if the cabin pressure goes down and there's not enough oxygen in the cabin of the airplane, these little masks will fall down from the ceiling. And I'm thinking, what a good idea. I would like to shake the hand, well, not during a pandemic, just bump the elbow of whoever created those masks, whoever thought of that idea. And they say, okay, now these masks will deliver oxygen to you. That's good. I've become very attached to oxygen. And So they tell you how to put on the mask, and then they tell you the airline principle. And it's really important. They say if you're traveling with children or with other people who need help with their masks, put your mask on first. That's such an important thing to remember in a difficult, traumatic situation, that if you don't take good care of yourself, then you will not be able to take care of others effectively. And so it's really important, as Dr. Wharton goes through these resources that she has compiled with the help of some of our graduate students for you today, to keep in mind that one of the first things that you must do is to figure out how to take care of yourself, how to eat right, how to do things that promote your sanity, that reduce your anxiety. Because, by the way, if your anxiety comes across at least as being reduced, that will be an important communication to your children about how they will respond to and deal with this difficult situation. And it's so important that you eat healthily and that you get enough sleep and that you just do some things for yourself. Dr. Wharton will be talking more about that in just a few minutes. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Shannon Worton. She's the Assistant Director of our School-Related Psychological Assessments and Clinical Interventions Clinic here at Nova Southeastern University. She's relatively new to our clinic and to our faculty, having only been here at Nova Southeastern as a faculty member since the beginning of this academic year. She worked at Carlos Albizu University prior to that, and she was a postdoctoral resident under my supervision prior to that. So, Shannon, will you please go ahead with your part of this presentation?
Yes, thank you for introducing me, and please continue to jump in. That's kind of how we have set this up. I'll be walking you all through what we have developed for you today, and then Dr. Cash will jump in when he'd like to share some of his comments. So he mentioned that our students were such an important role in helping us develop this presentation, and I view it as very much a parallel process when I thought about what I wanted to communicate today, definitely including techniques and resources and tangibles that you can use with your kids or that you could use with the parents who you help. That was a piece of it. But the other piece was really just creating a mindset and a philosophy around doing this work. And so we are very capable psychologists, but we too reach out to others when we need support during these times. And this definitely would not have been possible without these four students, Ashley, Corinne, Michaela, and Catalina. Each of them had a really integral role in helping us to develop the content and put things together. And I'll speak as if you all are parents, knowing that many of you are not parents or many of you might be helping parents. And that's really what we want to communicate. It's making me think of something Shonda Rhimes said in her book, The Year of Yes. And she said that people frequently ask her, how do you do it? How do you write these amazing shows like Grey's Anatomy or Scandal and have 3 kids at home and take care of yourself? And her answer was, I don't. If I'm doing great with the kids and I've gone to ballet class and the house is clean, I've missed a staff meeting or I didn't get a script on time. And if I did an amazing script, then I missed that ballet class. It's impossible for us to do everything on our own. And that kind of reminds me of something that I want to read to you. It's a poem that I came across, and it says, when a mother somewhere forgives herself for being human, earth exhales a little bit. And I just felt like that was so poignant and speaks to this next slide. And again, not everyone.
Shannon,
yeah.
Excuse me for interrupting, but before you go to that slide, I'd like to point out that 3 of those students who were integral in preparing this presentation are school psychology students, and one of them is a clinical psychology student.
Yes, yeah, thank you. And they were an important piece. And just as that poem suggests, not just mothers, but anyone taking part in supporting children during this time. I think it's so critical and necessary for us to forgive ourselves for being human. Some days things will go smoothly. I would not say perfectly, but smoothly. And other days it just feels hard. One motto that I really like, and maybe it will be useful for some of you, it's from another one of my favorite authors, Glennon Doyle. She frequently says, we can do hard things. And I think that's something we can hold on to, because what we're doing is hard. And if you are a parent, not only are you maintaining everything you maintained before the COVID pandemic, but now you have 50 million things on your plate, and you're being asked to teach, and you're being asked to review homework, and you're being asked to schedule your child's day. That's a lot. And so reminding ourselves we can do hard things, I think, should be coupled with, we also have to forgive ourselves for being human. So approaching it with both of those pieces might help that sanity aspect, right? Because again, sanity, a process. We won't feel that every single day, but we can start new the next day. So it's not just teaching from home. We really are surviving something together, and it's very much a shared experience. Hopefully these slides will be helpful resources, but again, reaching out to people in your community, we put some links at the end, family members if you're able to do that, clinicians like us if you're able to do that, reaching out to somebody to help you during this time. So this very much reflects this sentiment. And one thing that I want to point out, taking a break. So we're going to describe taking a break with your kids and making sure you're building in time so that they could have unstructured activity. Although we're talking to you about how do we become teachers and how do we succeed academically, part of that success is also giving ourselves time off. And I can speak to my own experience. If I just sit in front of the computer, since that's what we're doing now, and work for 8 hours straight, I'm going to be not only exhausted, but completely drained by the end of the day. And I might think, oh, if I take a 15-minute break to get up, move around, I'm wasting time, but really that is what allows me to do good work and to be my most effective self. So we want to do that with our kids, but we also want to do that with ourselves. And we are great role models. So taking the Airline principle that Dr. Cash shared, hopefully it makes us believe that having that non-structured time is productive. It is part of the process. It is what's going to help our kids to succeed academically because we're modeling that for them. The other thing is talking to kids. And so this presentation is not designed to navigate that conversation. We do have other presentations that have addressed that. The idea is that kids are holding on to all of the energy and all the feelings that are coming up during this COVID pandemic, just like we are. So if we're not sitting them down and processing it in a developmental way, it makes a lot of sense that their academics are going to struggle. They're anxious, they're not sleeping, they're frustrated because they don't understand why they can't say goodbye to their friends at the school year, and holding on to that is going to be a detriment. It's scary sometimes to have those conversations because we're not sure how much is too much to share with them. Again, we can point you to resources to do that, but what is helpful is giving them some context. We know that language helps us to understand our experiences, to put voice to it, and that helps us to feel better. It doesn't take it away, but at least helps us to process it. So one of the tangibles that we'd like to review is creating a routine. And it's something so simple, but also something incredibly powerful. And with kids, it can be done a few different ways, depending on their developmental level, and I'll show you some examples of that. As we're approaching those examples, I want you to think about these steps. So one is reviewing it together, particularly in the morning. So for kids who maybe attention is a little bit more difficult, reviewing it frequently throughout the day will also be helpful so that they know what to expect. We know as clinicians that kids thrive off of structure. They rebel against it. They don't like when we put rules and we say this is what we're going to do, but we also know that when we don't have that structure, it creates potential chaos, and they don't feel that safety and that security and that they know what to expect. So having it be predictable, having it be consistent, reviewing it in the morning and frequently helps to create that idea like, okay, I know what's going to happen during my day. Transitions are challenging. So we'll address that in a second. I won't think too much about it, but because we're encouraging taking breaks, having non-structured time, that also creates an opportunity for your little one to say, I'm not going to go back to math homework. I'm playing on my iPad, or I'm playing outside. That's way more fun than my spelling test. So we want to figure out how do we approach that in a way that's productive and still allows for that time. Movement is necessary. So again, kids are at home. They're not having PE time. They can't go to the parks. I guess it depends on where you live. I know some parks are open now, but many parks are not and are engaging in social distancing. So even if it's at home or walking around the house or walking around the room, just getting out of their chair is going to really help them to focus. And scheduling it. It seems like a silly thing to say, like schedule time to stand up and schedule time to move around. But if kids know that in 30 minutes, they're going to be able to go outside and play for 15, they can focus for that amount of time, or it makes them more able to focus during that amount of time. Substitution. So this is another great parallel process for kids. We should be revising our schedules and our routines. And if we set an agenda and then we start tackling that agenda and we say far too much for this day, it's okay to change it. It's okay to say, I expected way too much of myself, so I'm really just going to tackle these first two pieces. And it's okay to express that to our kids. We want them to see us navigate that. We want them to see us set, revise, reflect on our own experiences, and really think about what can I do and what can't I do during the day. And make sure it works for your family. You are an expert on your kids, and if you're people working with parents, you are an expert on the psych side of things, or mental health side of things, or social work side of things, but you're working with this family who's an expert on their kids. And so use that as you're guiding this process. This is also a really helpful time after school is done for family bonding. And so the compartmentalization, I think, really helps. And so I kind of have two competing thoughts. So one is that for some families, it's beneficial to say, okay, from 9 to 12, we're doing schoolwork, and after schoolwork, we're transitioning to this. Other families prefer to spread this out across the day. And it might be trial and error. Are you a family that it's better just to knock it all out, or are you a family that's better to spread it out? And once it's done, spend time together. Again, this idea that it is productive to have downtime. It is productive to watch a movie as a family, cook as a family, take a family walk, or to have your kids doing those activities on their own as well. So establishing a routine afterward, also really helpful. Okay, so just some samples. All these are either printable or they're hyperlinked so that you can print it out. If you don't have a printer, that's also fine. You can write it out, you can cut out pictures, whatever is meaningful for you. It creates a visual representation. And for kids, especially younger kids, but even older kids, having that visual representation reminds them, gives them that sense of security. They know what to expect, and it gives them that awesome experience of crossing things off when they're done. And I know I'm not the only one who loves to cross things off of their to-do list. Sometimes I will even write something down that I've already done just so I can have that sensation of crossing it off, to know, like, this is how much I accomplished today. So this is one example. This one comes from the CDC. It's nice because you can fill in your own activity, and then you can also check it off in the little marks to the right when you're finished. For kids who are little, or perhaps children with developmental delays, picture-based visuals are helpful. There are words sometimes associated if they're learning to read, or they're emerging their literacy skills. And sometimes it's just nice to teach them which words pair with each picture, so you can take the words out if that works for your family. But this creates the visuals of what we expect to do in each day. And again, they can check it off. They can put a sticker star on it once they do it. You might have it in different places of the house. So you might have it in their room, you might have it in their bathroom, you might have it on the refrigerator. It doesn't have to be one place. You can have multiple visualizations. And then another one just to check. So this just gives you ideas of what it might look like. So I found this how-to that I thought was really great if you are wanting to create your own, or you're a clinician and you want to guide families in creating their own visual schedules. This one in particular was designed for children with autism, though I feel like it could be helpful for many different children. And so one of the things you want to do is decide how you're going to create the visualization. Do you want just objects, symbols, like it's on the left? Do you want photographs that kids can understand? Do you want to have them draw? And so that's a really nice thing to do also, to include children in that process. If you're creating a schedule for them, you want them to feel like they're a part of it, because they have a sense of agency and ownership over their day. So having their own drawings would be a nice thing, and plus a great activity just to give them more things to do during the day. And then, like we described, attaching words to it also for emerging readers. If it's an older child or a teen, having something written, planner, those are going to be helpful tools. I liked this trick as well. So if we want them to be very involved in this process of creating schedules and implementing their schedule, they can pick off the picture or the symbol, whatever we've designed for them. Maybe you have it like on a clipboard or on the kitchen table. They pick it up and they take it to wherever they're going. So if they have to take a bath, if they have to complete a homework assignment, they bring it with them. That serves as a reminder, so they put it in front of them and they're constantly looking at it and thinking, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing right now. So it really promotes on-task behavior. And then they take it, and as it shows here, they can put it in their little finished compartment, I guess you could say. Or they can cross it off if that's what's working for them. But I like the idea, especially for little ones, to have that constant source of, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This speaks to one thing we've already discussed, is figuring out how long the schedule should be. Trial and error, making sure we're revising every single day. And then letting them know that we can be flexible. So some families find it really helpful to have cards with many different options. So this could be an example of two of the options on your card. So maybe you say, okay, today we thought about playing outside, but I'm gonna swap it for the playing with trains cards. That's another great motivational tool. So I'll speak to academic motivation in a second, but establishing a system where kids can select what they want to work for will encourage them to maintain their on-task behaviors, complete their assignments, etc. And I should say also, as we're approaching the end of the school year, all of these ideas can be transitioned to summertime. So really, regardless of what the family is doing during the summer, what your family is doing during the summer, creating some type of plan might help the days to go by with a little bit more sanity. Okay, we talked about this as well. So I think we reviewed feeling good physically. I will say, if you go onto YouTube or you go onto local gyms' websites or on their Facebook, there are so many free resources. So for example, I enjoy yoga, maybe a teen would enjoy yoga. The gym closest to me that provides yoga classes, they have them all videotaped and they share them at no charge, which has been so great. And so whatever your kid is into, having them to engage. I was looking on Instagram, and there's a family that does like almost dancing lessons, but very child friendly. Like they're a family who dances together and they post it on Instagram once a day or once a week so that everyone can do it as well. So finding these safe activities for kids will help release some of that energy so that they can better focus. During the remaining of the school year, we can teach kids to check in with whatever their teacher has posted and add that to their to-do list for the day. And if big tasks feel very overwhelming for them, teach them how to break it down into smaller steps. So instead of saying, oh, I have to finish this whole book to do my book report, just setting aside, I have to do 20 pages, or I need to spend 15 minutes reading my book. So we don't want to assume that they have those breaking down goals into sub-goals skills. We want to explicitly teach that to them. And then to prioritize. So I know for some, it's really helpful to do like an ABC thing. If you take your list for this day, you ask yourself, what must I do today? What cannot wait until tomorrow? Put an A next to those things. What can absolutely wait until tomorrow or even next week? Put a C next to those. And then everything else gets a B. And truthfully, I still do things like that. When we have major to-do lists and there's I think with the COVID pandemic, it seems like there's so much more work to be done. We need to be checking in with what do I have to do versus what can I push till tomorrow. And then again, the thing that I started with, reminding ourselves we are human. So we are going to look back on the day in which we might have handled it differently. That's okay. It's part of the process. Starting over tomorrow is what we will do. So the fourth point, doing what's easy. This is another thing that's going to be dependent on the child. For some, doing easy tasks first boosts that motivation, right? So we can ease them into the day. For others, saving the hard things for later keeps them holding on to that feeling and holding on to that dread for most of the quote unquote school day. And then that's not very helpful. If I know I have to do my least preferred activity at the end of the day, I'm going to be dreading it all day. And imagine how much energy goes into that dreading. For me, it's better to just get it out of the way early so that I don't have to think about it anymore. That alone gives me that feeling of accomplishment, and then I can progress. So that's a great tool for kids to learn, right? How do we have enough determination and have enough motivation to target the things that we don't like because of the reward at the end. Okay, so transitions. If we are building in those breaks, which we will, we don't want to have a kid going from a preferred activity to a non-preferred activity. So if Johnny is outside playing and then we say, okay, Johnny, come back, we're going to start our math assignment, I doubt Johnny is going to be thrilled about that request. And so if we create a middle step, something that's an okay, maybe it's not preferred, maybe it's not preferred, but it's an okay activity, Johnny's more likely to come inside. So maybe Johnny really likes iPads, and if we engage him in a math exercise on the iPad, he's more likely to do it. So I might say, okay, come in, we're going to spend a few minutes on the iPad, and then we're going to do our math homework. That's going to feel easier for Johnny to say, okay, let me come in from outside. If you have a little one, maybe they really like coloring. So they go from doing whatever they were doing to let's them spend some time sitting at the desk coloring a picture or drawing a picture, and then we're going to go to spelling. It also gets them where you want them to be. So not only does it make it more likely that they'll follow through with that request, but it gets them sitting in front of a desk or wherever you have decided to do that work and sitting down in a chair. As a little bit of a caveat to that, I will say I think it's fine if kids are not necessarily seated 24/7 when they're doing their work, as long as they're focused. So if they want to stand up at the table or if they want to be comfortable on the couch but they're focused and that allows them to be more productive, I'm fine with that. So it's figuring out what works for that particular kid. Okay. Most of these things we've spoken about. This is particular to helping kids who have difficulties focusing. But one thing that we didn't discuss is using a timer. So another very simple recommendation, but really effective. So if you put something on your phone, I have it hyperlinked right here. There's other websites you can use, and you say for 15 minutes, this is what we're going to be doing, and they can visualize the 15 minutes. That one decreases the likelihood that they're going to ask you every 30 seconds, are we done? How much more time is left? They can see it. It teaches them time and time management skills, and that is huge when it comes to success academically. And it also allows them to know what to expect. So setting a timer as we're working on these things will be helpful.
And by the way, it is important to keep in mind that different kids have different amounts of time for which they're capable of focusing and working on a particular task. And that may in part be task dependent, but more importantly, it's developmental or dependent upon their developmental level. And so it's really critical to find out for your child or your children what amount of time can they actually work and pay attention and adjust the breaks accordingly so that you have a short break after. And a good rule of thumb is that for every year of a child's age, they probably can work for that number of minutes without taking a break. And sometimes we expect way too much of kids focusing for extended periods of time.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And again, I look to myself when I think about what we do with kids. It's hard for me to sit in front of the computer for even an hour without moving at all. And so imagine that pressure for a little one who has so much more energy usually than we do. So that's a great suggestion.
Well, Dr. Wharton, that's because you're not 60 years old yet. If you were 60 years old, then you could sit for an hour.
Fair, good point. I will look forward to that time in my life. So increasing academic motivation can be done via a reward system. And something that I want to say now, in case I forget, but I'll be talking about positive psychology in a little bit, is grit, this character trait, this strength of persevering and continuing even when something's hard and reinforcing that in our kids. That's one of the best predictors of success. And I really want kids to know that they're going to be great in some things and other things are going to be difficult for them. And that's okay. We don't want them to hold on to this idea that they must be stellar in every single academic subject or in every single academic task. It's just not reasonable. We want them to learn and we want them to meet grade level expectations, but we all have inherent strengths and weaknesses. And I think this is another thing we know to be true, but we don't necessarily have frequent conversations with kids about this. And so if the idea is let's promote grit, so even when things are hard, kids will continue to try, we can use these academic motivation techniques. And one of them that many of us are familiar with is a reward system or a token economy system, which is essentially creating things that kids are working for. And if you're working with little ones or you have a little one, having it daily is going to be helpful because they don't have the ability to think like, oh, in a week, I'm going to be able to do this. You guys have probably seen on social media now they're doing like the M&M challenge with kids where you put a bowl of M&Ms in front of a little one, 3, 4 years old, and you tell them if when I come back, you can have the M&Ms, and then you record them and you see how many of them actually eat the M&Ms, kind of based on one of the old experiments that we know. And we see that if we ask a little one, a 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old to wait an extended period of time for a reward, that's so difficult for them. They need that immediate reinforcement. So we want to build that in. When we are reinforcing, we also want to praise not just tasks, but the effort. You tried really hard, you focused really well, you sat down in your chair for 5 full minutes, you answered 10 questions, not just they did it correctly, but that they tried. You were going to say something, Dr. Cash?
Yeah, I was going to say that very often parents are concerned when kids are in school why they can't work toward getting an A or an A or a B or a passing grade during the grading period. Well, most grading periods in school are 6 weeks or more, and you can see that working toward larger and longer term goals for middle and high school kids, they have such difficulty doing that more than monthly, and more often it should be weekly, as it says earlier. So it's not surprising that they have difficulty, not all kids, but most of them have difficulty working toward a grade at the end of the grading period.
And having that be frequent. So if, let's say you're working from home too, and you have a work call and Johnny needs to sit at his desk for 30 minutes and focus so that you can focus also. Maybe you pause the work call every few minutes and you reinforce what he's doing. I love how you're working quietly. I love how you're sitting down. Good job answering your questions, rather than waiting for the non-compliant behavior to happen. And we know from our behavioral principles that reinforcing kids in this way makes it much less likely that they're going to be off task or they're going to be non-compliant. It's also nice that they can work on long-term goals. And so daily frequent reinforcements, yes. And for bigger rewards for little ones, that might be like an end of the week, let's reflect on our behaviors and then earn something, or for older kids at the end of the month. And to progress monitor. And so here are some examples of progress monitoring. This chart on the left I like because similar to creating the visual chart, you can make this so that you can reuse it. So maybe you laminate. If you have access to a laminator, you go to an office supply store, you laminate the piece of paper so that you can use a dry erase marker and write on it. Or maybe you have a whiteboard, or maybe you just print this out every day and you draw on what they're working toward. But what they're working toward is a necessary part. So we can't just say, oh, you're gonna work towards iPad time. Maybe that's not what's motivating them on that particular day. So we give them options, they select what they wanna work toward that particular day, and then in the spaces under, they put the sticker, the star, the check mark, whatever. I've also seen this done with like Velcro, so that the little stars have Velcro on it and you just stick it to the places that they go. Reinforcing kids and doing it consistently, following through with our promises is a must. So if they learn not to trust us, they're gonna stop doing what we're asking them to do. But I think another great technique is giving them opportunities to learn from choices that they made. So for example, if we say, little Johnny, I want you to do your spelling test, and he doesn't do his spelling test, we don't give him the reward as soon as he does it, right? Because he should have done that to begin with. So he does that, and then he overlearns. Maybe he learns 5 new words. And then after he overcorrects for the behavior, then he gets the reinforcement. So we don't want to reinforce for something that should have been done in the first place, but we do want to provide opportunities for kids to learn from the choices that they made so that they are reinforced for correcting that behavior. Okay, so we spoke about this, reinforcing efforts, not just what they do correct. I'm going to skip through these. I'll come back to it if I have time. I'm just looking at my clock. So these are some ideas for keeping kids busy during the school day. So let's say you've done your work, you want them to be engaged, being a pen pal, writing a letter. There's examples of science experiments. If you have privacy controls on your Google or on your YouTube, you can have them search for science experiments you could do at home. Really reinforces their curiosity, their creativity. They learn in the process through trial and error. So it's a win-win, and it keeps them occupied. So those are just some examples. This is another great website. I won't speak to it specifically, but I wanted to provide this resource. The CDC has an Essentials for Parenting page. And one of the things I like about it is each of these 6 quadrants have corresponding videos. So let's say if you are a parent or if you're working with a parent, you can go to this page and see if I'm trying to learn how to provide my child directions and they're not compliant. These are the steps I can take. This is what it looks like. The videos demonstrate parents doing that with their kids. So it's a really great resource. So let's spend a few minutes talking about positive parenting. So one, framework for us is this Perma Theory. And again, although it's not exclusively academically based, this theory of well-being and theory of creating fulfillment is that we should be targeting each of these areas as we're approaching our days, weeks, months, etc. And one of those is accomplishment and achievement. So you can see it at the end. And so that's something that we're working on academically. But if we want kids and if we expect kids to really have a sense of fulfillment, to be able to focus, to be their best selves, to have energy, we also need to target these other areas. And so incorporating some positive parenting strategies during our days will help facilitate this piece. And if you want to learn more about this, you can follow the link at the end. So one of those positive parenting strategies is teaching kids about their signature strengths. So I see it's a little bit blurry here, but again, you can go to this link and print this out for your kids and teach them what character strengths means. And we know that, at least from this theory's perspective, each of us have all of these character strengths to different levels. And many of us have several that are really prominent in our lives. And then there are others that it's a little bit more effortful for us to incorporate, but we all have all of them. And it ties to this idea of resilience, because focusing on character strengths and teaching kids what character strengths they have gives them this resilience. And every kid is resilient, and every kid can become more resilient. It's not that there's some kids who are resilient and others who are not. We can foster resilience in kids depending on what preset level they're at. Were you going to say something, Dr. Cash?
Yes, several people have chatted that they either have missed something in the PowerPoint or wondered if the PowerPoint would be available. And it's my understanding that Dr. Perez will send this PowerPoint out to all participants after the presentation.
Yeah. And so if we're targeting academic skills and we know which, let's say, 5 character strengths are more prominent in our children, we can use them to drive their tasks. So for example, let's say the child is very creative and that's their character strength, and we are teaching them something new about history. Maybe they then create a story that incorporates the facts that they've learned about history, and they draw a picture that's associated with it. So they're using that strength for the purpose of achieving academically. And this website has a lot of great ideas for how to incorporate each one of those things. They also release a parenting tips resource each month. They've been doing this especially during the COVID time. And I really like it because it's not super overwhelming in that they look at each of the weeks of the month and they say, okay, these are some things that we can work on. So just as an example, the first week of May was focused on hope. And so we can teach kids what this character strength looks like, what it might look like in them, but also really cool, we can send them out to find that character strength in others. So maybe they have to, for the books that they're reading for school, identify characters in those books that demonstrate hope or represent hope. It also gives links and resources to foster that sense of hope. So John Krasinski has a YouTube channel where he posts happy videos and feel-good videos. He also does it on Instagram. And I feel strongly about having sources of motivation and inspiration during our day, because if we're just focusing on the tasks that have to be done, that feels very overwhelming. But if we can find what's meaningful for us and why we're doing these things, how it connects to things that are a strength for us or things that we're interested in, it feels a little bit more manageable, if you will. Building in these activities during break times is another great idea, because we can feel comfortable sending them to do these things and that it's a meaningful experience for them. Another one, for example, maybe it was this week or this month, they posted this Bravery Buddies activity for kids. And so it teaches them about bravery. And during this COVID pandemic, it's such a great parallel. So it says, this is what bravery might look like, has this quote that we can share with them. And then it sends them to look for examples of bravery in the first line team, and the doctors and nurses, our law enforcement, anyone who's supporting us during this time. At the beginning, we said talking to kids about what's going on in the world is important, and that's true. And also helping them to find meaning in that adversity, meaning in these really difficult things, make it more manageable for them. So we're not just sharing the negative, we're also sharing some of the good in the world. And as a reminder to ourselves that doing these things are productive, they are increasing academic motivation, because it gives kids that energy and that security and that motivation, which I've said a few times. So I put this here. A lot of us talk about gratitude. We know so much about the benefits of gratitude exercises. And one of the things Dr. Cash said at the very beginning, making sure we're taking care of our basic needs, which is sleep and eating well, exercise. And gratitude has been found to really promote good sleep. And interestingly, there is a study done with kids that showed if they do something like this, the 3 good things, right before bed, their sleep quality is better. And there's many studies that suggest getting good sleep and sufficient sleep helps, is a significant protective factor. It really allows us to experience a lot of what we're experiencing. And again, not to say it will not affect us at all, but it allows us to cope better. So this is something really simple you can do with kids. You can print out this worksheet, you can print it from here, you can write it down in a journal. They can create picture representations. You want them to think about 3 good things that happened to them on that day, and be reflective in that process too. So if I just quickly ramble off 3 things, it's not going to really do very much. The second piece of that is, why did those things occur? So let's say I really love sunsets and I set my alarm for whatever time the sun comes up. You all know I'm not a morning person just by this story because I have no idea what time the sun comes up, but I set the alarm to see the sunset. I go, and one of my 3 good things is I saw this beautiful sunset. If I ask myself, why did this occur? I'm going to think, okay, well, the sun comes up every day. That's not where we're at. The why did it occur is I purposely and intentionally set that timer, walked outside, took those 5 minutes to review the sunset, and it really created a long-lasting impact on my day. And that's a piece that's helpful for kids and people all ages, because it shows them that they have control. In a world where we have little control over many things, we also want to create a sense of agency and a sense of control, and a sense that you can still do things during these very difficult days that will feel good, that you can appreciate, that you can have gratitude. And if we do that and we're very purposeful of it, then we know that not only will sleep improve, academic success, social relationships, resilience, all of those things improve. And so this is the way to record it. If you're interested in this for your little ones or the families that you work with, it's free, so they can go to this survey. You click on, if you see on the right-hand side, the VIA Youth Survey for ages 10 to 17. It's a little bit long, I will say. I forget the exact number of questions, but it's in the hundreds. But they answer whether something is very like them or not like them. So maybe it's a question about sunsets. Do you really love to look at sunsets? Very like me, not like me. Based on those questions and the answers, it gives you the list of the 24 character strengths for you. So it will say your top character strength is love, your number 2 is curiosity, your number 3 is teamwork, etc. And then once the kids have identified what are their character strengths, they can start having conversations about not only where those strengths are most evident, which is really cool, times that they've used those strengths, but also really cool, how can they use those top 5 strengths to address the most difficult aspects of their day, including their academics. So maybe teamwork is their top strength, and they're struggling with science. Maybe they reach out to peers, or they do a group project together to really reinforce that learning material. And then they feel they're more open to it, because again, it's tapping into their strengths. And as an aside, adults can do this too. You just do the adult-based survey. So we'll stop in a few minutes just to answer any questions that you all might have. These I'm not going to speak to. I just want to point you in this direction. One of our students is very interested in mindfulness, and she came up with many awesome resources for kids. And I asked her, like, are these kid-friendly, and that we can send them to this link and feel comfortable that they're going to watch this or listen to this? And she said yes. And this one on this page is a podcast. So it essentially walks kids through like guided imagery. So imagining a certain scene so that they can practice their mindfulness. And the benefit of mindfulness in academic success is mindfulness teaches us to not just be there in the present moment, but to really quiet the mind, to focus on something. And it's really hard. So I shared with you that I like yoga, and at the end of yoga, you practice this pose where you're laying perfectly still. And it's the hardest pose to do because you want to move around, you want to fix yourself, you're feeling fidgety, and the work is in resisting those impulses, resisting those urges. And it's through sitting with those feelings of being uncomfortable that we learn how to do that. So maybe today I can only sit with those feelings for 5 seconds, but tomorrow I can sit with them for 10 seconds. That's the work that's being done. And that's what we want to teach kids to do. How do they resist those impulses to not focus or to do something that they prefer? How do they maintain that grit, if you will, to complete their tasks? And this is one way of doing that, teaching them mindfulness and practicing mindfulness on a regular basis. So you all can go to that podcast. These are follow along YouTube videos, and so you can click on any of these links. The amount of time is on there as well, so you can pick and choose depending on how much time you have. And some mindfulness activities for any age, and then additional resources for parents. We spoke a lot about connection, and just one last piece on this. When kids are removed from their school environment, and if that was a source of social connection for them, that's not the case for every child, but if it was the source of social connection for them, finding ways to maintain that will be very meaningful so that they feel like all of those aspects of PERMA are being met. And these are some ways that they might do that. So I just want to show you a few more things. These additional resources. So along with really having this framework that all aspects are going to help kids succeed in school. And when I say all aspects, I mean the mindfulness and the positive parenting and having physical movements and having unstructured time. All of these things increase academic motivation. But if we're just targeting academics, these are some links that you can go to. They were developed or put together, I should say, by NSU CARD, that center. And so we have them for STEM, for math, social studies, language arts, and arts and music. And so again, it can feel a little bit overwhelming. So I would say pick one a day, a week, whatever works for you, and just see what's on there. See what you like, see what your kids might be interested in. And even if you have one new resource today or tomorrow, that might make the day a little bit easier. Okay, so I think now is a good time to pause and go to Janine and see what questions we might want to address.
I can't hear you, Janine.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. All right, there's one question about if any of the May parenting tips are available in Spanish, or if any of these other resources are available in Spanish.
Yeah, so a lot of these links will provide handouts and PDFs in English and in Spanish. And if you go, let me go to the other, hold on one second. Oh, I have these twice, I'm sorry. So if you go to Child Mind Resource, our Child Mind Institute rather, has a ton of resources. And Catalina, one of our students, has a Google Drive that she's made publicly available for her work, and they have a bunch of resources both in Spanish and in English.
All right, and then a lot of the other questions so far have just been about if the PowerPoints will be available, which Dr. Cash has already addressed that they'll be sent out later. And then we've got some more questions that are coming in now. So
one of them asked me what's the university to which I referred at the beginning. The university where Dr. Wharton and I work, where Dr. Perez works, and where Janine is a graduate student, is Nova Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale. The main campus is in Fort Lauderdale. We have a variety of campuses across the state and across the country.
All right, what about best approaches starting as a parent who didn't have structure before and is now going crazy?
If you will repeat that, I would appreciate it. I was reading a chat line.
Oh, you're good. There's a question, what is the best approach to start with as a parent who did not have structure before and is now going crazy?
Well, the first thing to do if you're going crazy is to try to fix it so you don't go crazy, because if you do, then it makes it much harder for you to deal with kids. But in terms of trying to institute structure for kids or trying to institute any kind of behavior change with kids, you have to have reasonable expectations and start where the kids are rather than where you would like them to be. And so there is a strategy in psychology called the strategy of reinforcing successive approximations. What you do is to say, okay, I would like for my kids to be structured for the entire day. Let me start out by getting them structured for the first thing in the morning, where they wake up and they eat breakfast. If I can get that structure involved or get that structure in place, then I can go to the next step. So it's really important to recognize that whatever behavior change that we want in kids, particularly kids who are difficult to manage, it's going to be very important to do that in small doses and gradually increase those doses. A very famous psychologist, Dr. Jensen, said that sometimes in order to get kids to make behavior changes and to start where they are, we have to reinforce very basic things. He said, with some kids with whom I've worked, I've had to start by saying, I really like the way you breathe. And then progress from there. I really like the way you breathe and the way you just paid attention to what I said, and so forth. Obviously, with most kids, or hopefully with most kids, you don't have to start that at that basic level, but it is important to start at a level that will enable the kids to succeed right away. And then you reinforce that success. Instead of saying, as some parents do, finally you got up on time, you little, why couldn't you do that every day? That's not reinforcing. That doesn't help. What does help is to say, wow, you got up on time today. Let's go have your favorite breakfast. So if you start there and you are reinforcing, people, even difficult kids, work for reinforcement, they work for praise, and they work for some kinds of tangible things like their favorite breakfast or their favorite TV show and so forth. Dr. Worton addressed that earlier, but it's very important to start where the kids are and not expect too much too soon.
And I think to build on that, to not give up. It takes time for kids to adjust, especially if we've never implemented any of these things before. To then expect them to do even a piece of it might be difficult for them. So just because they're resisting and just because they're tantruming doesn't mean that it doesn't work. It just means they have to get used to it. So if we can continue to be consistent and implement it, they will be more likely to comply later on.
Right.
What about advice for parents with teenagers who the teenagers are refusing to do schoolwork?
Okay. When teenagers are refusing to do schoolwork, once again, you have to start at a very basic level. But it's also important to remember that for all school-age kids, school is their job. And ask yourself, if they decided or if they were not paying me to do my job, would I do it? The answer generally is no. I mean, I happen to have a great job and I probably would do it. No, I'm not going to say that on camera because the university administration might decide to stop paying me. But in general, we would not do our jobs unless we were paid. And so it's a good idea to negotiate with teens what the payment might be. And that payment doesn't necessarily have to be cash money. That payment, by the way, I don't understand why they named money after me, but at any rate, it doesn't have to be in cash. It can be in free time, it can be in screen time, it can be in other things that parents have the opportunity to control and that teenagers want. But the bottom line is that you start out, like I said before, okay, if you do this math homework, let's talk about what you would get in return. And eventually, hopefully, after some period of time, of using that strategy, it will be sufficient that to the teenager that they pleased you. But when you start out with teenagers, very often they don't care whether they please you or not, or at least they don't act as if they care whether they please you or not. So you may have to start out with some kind of tangible reinforcers.
So reinforcers are so important for teens, because if I imagine if I had a 5-year-old and a 15-year-old in my house, I would be much more inclined to spend a lot of time with that 5-year-old because they require more of that structure. And that means I might forget about that 15-year-old who also really likes that reinforcement and likes being told and likes having attention. So I think making sure we don't forget about them and those basic needs and having those tangible reinforcements is a great suggestion.
Okay, great. And then I have one last question about for different age students. So maybe somebody's in 8th grade and another child's in 4th grade, or 10th grade and 3rd grade. Ideas to make sure that both children are being equally helped.
Good point. And very often, it doesn't always work, but very often kids who are older actually like to help younger kids, and they learn from it. I don't know if you've noticed, but when you try to teach something, you have to get to know it pretty well. and it involves practicing it as you go along. And so sometimes it's helpful to assign the older child or the more advanced child, although if that more advanced child is younger, it can be really touchy. But to assign the older and more advanced child to work with the younger child for a period of time. That gives you a break as a parent. It also gives the older child a sense of importance and mastery, and it gives the younger child a tutor to whom he or she can go when they're struggling. And then for the older child, there are a lot of resources here that we put in to keep that person busy, and hopefully that older child will be better able to focus for a longer period of time while we work with the younger child. And then we can take a few moments of break to reorient or to make the next assignment for the older child. So you do staggered working with each of the kids. It's a skill that with practice you learn, and it becomes almost automatic.
That looks like that's all the questions that we've been sent so far.
Great, thank you. I think that Dr. Perez wants to say a few things to the folks here.
Well, thank you, Dr. Cash, Dr. Wharton, and Janine. I appreciate all your time. We, as always, and Shannon, I think we need to lose you. It's 1 o'clock.
Yes, yes.
And so you want to give your parting words?
Yes, thank you all for participating, for sharing this time with us. I appreciate it. And
I also have to leave for another meeting. I am very grateful that those of you who tuned in were interested in watching this video. Thank you for the positive feedback that we've gotten on the chats. Dr. Wharton did just a fabulous job of putting this PowerPoint together with student help, and Janine did a great job of answering the questions, and Dr. Perez always does a great job of organizing things. So thank you very much, and appreciate your attendance.
Thank you all. I'll say also our contact information is on the NSU website, just in case anyone wanted to reach out to us.